Hello and welcome to the Daily Racing Form Breeders' Cup Handicapping session sponsored by Keeneland Select. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, joined as always on these handicapping sessions by Mike Hogan. And today we have two very special guests. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that these two men have had a profound impact on my life. And it's such a pleasure to get the chance to work with them again here. I'm talking about the creator of the Beyer Speed Figures and the author of Picking Winners, among many other fine handicapping books, Andrew Beyer, on the first hand. How are you today, Andy?
I'm well. Hello, everybody.
And also joined today by a renowned handicapper and author. His new book, very appropriate for this weekend, is called Cashing Big on Racing's Biggest Days. He's Steve Davidowitz. Steve, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well, Peter. Good to talk to you. And hi, Andy.
Hey, Steve.
Pete, this is going to be a fun one. We've got a lot of races to cover.
Pretty straightforward deal.
Yeah.
We're going to roll through the Friday and Saturday. Exactly. Lots of stuff going on. But I do want to point out that folks can go ahead and ask us questions at any point during the webinar, and we'll get to those. Mike's demonstrating now how you can use that tool to submit your question. We'll get to as many as we can during the show, and perhaps can do a little bit of follow-up afterwards on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at LoomsBoldly. You can find Mike at DRF Formulator, or if your queries are of a more personal nature, at DRF Hogan. But I say we just dive right in here, folks, and get started with these four Breeders' Cup races taking place at Santa Anita, the great race place, on Friday. The first race we're going to talk about is race 6. It's an intriguing-looking undercard. I haven't had much time to spend any time on. That's what plane rides are for. But the first Breeders' Cup race goes as the 6th. It's the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, a race where the foreign invaders have held a strong hand in the past. Andy, just for starters, do you see this as a race that's likely to go to foreigners, or do you think the North American contingent has a shot?
Well, I say only if we count a Woodbine shipper as foreign. I think Good Samaritan is definitely the horse to beat in this field. I mean, his win at Woodbine got a better speed figure than any previous running of the Juvenile Turf. And, he did it honestly. He rallied 5 wide into a slow pace. To me, this is the one to beat. I mean, the one other horse that I'm a little intrigued by here is the European Lancaster Bomber. This horse has been a rabbit for the stable's big 2-year-old Churchill. And he hasn't taken a dime in the wagering, because he's not really in there to try to win the race. But now he's got a chance to run his own race, and I think he can certainly be a factor. But I'm committed to Good Samaritan.
He's a big horse, and he's a great-looking horse, and he's shown a lot of versatility too. Steve, do you see this one in a similar way?
Well, I had him marked on my program from the moment that the advanced PPs came out, yet I was a little concerned that they had listed as first preference the dirt juvenile, and I was shaking my head all the way until yesterday when they decided, no, we're going to go in the turf juvenile, and I think he is clearly the horse to beat. I do like his running style. I do like the preparation he's had since that's mid-September race. He's had steady workouts that are typical of Mott when he's got a good horse and how he's training him. And I see this horse as having both a dirt and a turf potential long-term, but he's in the right race here. Now, it's a very large field, and you can get trouble in a large field, especially in a 2-turn mile that begins in front of the grandstand without much of a run into the straightaway. And he does come from off the pace. So there are potential upsetters that have speed. There are horses that could get lucky in the race. Nobody's going to hand it to this horse easily, but I think you will see him finishing pretty strongly. The horse that attracts my interest as a secondary possibility is somewhat unlikely at 4-1. I couldn't believe that they made this horse 4-1. That's Oscar Performance. He's won 2 races on the lead, yet he was not used up hardly at all in either of those wins. One over a firm course at Saratoga, one over a yielding course at Belmont. He's trained well going into this race too, but he's got 13 posts, which, if I just said, could be problems for a lot of horses. But in this case, it could give him a position where he's sitting just off the pace instead of on the pace. So he'd be my backup horse in that race.
All right, you got one from the front end, Steve, and one coming from closing. It'll be an interesting race. There does seem to be plenty of pace signed on. Maybe being from the far outside, Oscar Performance has his hand forced a little bit, and it helps set things up for both of your guys' top picks, Good Samaritan. It's going to be an interesting race, and hopefully a chance for a North American-based horse to get something done against the European contingent. Let's move on.
Before we move on, Pete, yeah, I have a question. It's actually one of mine. It's sort of a personal question for both of you guys. Steve, let's start with you since you're the author of the book. On such a big day, both on Saturday and on Friday, how are you guys going to be approaching it from a wagering standpoint? Are you going to be looking to play mostly multis? Are you going to be focusing in on certain races and playing them vertically with exactas and tries? Or have you not even gotten to that point yet because we're still a few days out?
Well, that's the key point there, and you have to respect that. It's Tuesday, and we do need to look at how these races shape up as we get closer and closer. My intention is to use multi-race exotics where they are reasonable and where I'm not anchored on a very heavily bet favorite, and I'm also thinking of superfectas where they'll be available. And I'll just take my time getting there. I do have a seminar on Friday evening for the Saturday races at the Sunset Station Racebook, and I'll have my outline, my plays for the Saturday card laid out there pretty well on that occasion. But for now, it's just like, yes, I want to play the multiple race exotics. I want to play tries and supers, but I have to reserve some judgment as we move forward.
Perfect. Andy, he's taking the same approach?
Yeah, I've sort of let my opinions in different races guide me. I'm more of an exacta player, and a single race player. But this Friday sequence, I mean, it looks pretty clear cut to me. If Steve can give me the winner of the Juvenile Fillies Turf, but the other three races look pretty straightforward. So maybe the Friday pick 4 could be the key to the weekend.
I wonder if Andy is tipping his hand a little bit as to who he likes in the BC Dirt Mile. But before we get Andy's full discussion of that race, let's turn it back to Steve and see what he thinks about this race, particularly in multi-race sequences. Is Dortmund, in fact, the short-priced standout he appears to be, or is this maybe a place to spread a little bit and try to get a price in? What do you think, Steve?
Well, I like Gunrunner's chances to upset the heavy favorite Dortmund. I think Dortmund's a logical horse in this race. I think Bob Baffert has put him in the right spot and not pushed him into an impossible matchup in the Classic or any other spot. But Gunrunner has appealed to me for a lot of reasons that I think he's going to be firing late. I think he's been brought into this race absolutely perfectly. And I do think that he's going to give Dortmund all he can handle in the race.
I like it. Andy, where are you in the Dirt Mile?
Well, I'm not with Gunrunner. I'm actually shocked by that opinion. I mean, this year's 3-year-old crop, with the exception of the one race by Arrogate, was terrible, or maybe that's an overstatement. Was mediocre, and I mean, here's a 3-year-old who really didn't distinguish himself that much in this group, and now is going against older horses, and particularly a horse like Dortmund, who's been knocking heads with with California Chrome and the best older horses around. I can't get clever here. I mean, I think Dortmund is, the most likely winner on any of the 13 races. I mean, if I'm playing in
Let me come back in there for a second.
Yeah.
I do think the way this race is going to shape up, Run Happy is going to be on the lead. And Run Happy is nothing but a front-running horse. And he could go all the way if he gets lucky. He won the sprint last year. He's prepping for this mile. And I think that Dortmund is going to be with Gun Runner, or very close through much of the race. And I think it is going to give this horse that I like, Gun Runner, a realistic chance to get them both. And it's just the way that I watched his last race and the way that he ran. And I also thought that his workout line is very positive. And I like Steve Asmussen's work with this horse. And I think he's going to run the lifetime best race, his best race of his life on Friday.
That is an interesting way to look at the race, that maybe Dortmund going to have to go a little bit faster than he wants to go with the presence of Run Happy in the race. Andy, do you see Run Happy as a straight bet against in here?
Yeah, I mean, this horse. I mean, I guess this horse is a good example of why you have trainers as opposed to furniture store owners, managing race horses. I mean, for them to try to decide, oh, this horse is really a miler, and bringing back after a long layoff and an injury to a distance where he had never run before is nuts. And I can't see Dortmund being a sacrificial lamb, to run against Run Happy. He'll sit second behind Run Happy and, go past him when the leader collapses.
Not that it makes it any less nuts, but I believe the plan with Run Happy is to stretch him out looking towards the Pegasus, that the race happening in January.
There was actually an intelligent plan that could have been concocted for Run Happy, and that would be to have run in one sprint prep, to run in the Breeders' Cup sprint, and then if they want to see if he's a miler, run him in the Cigar Mile. That way you don't burn up his Breeders' Cup chances when he's not ready for it. This is a terrific horse, and nothing makes me madder than to see see people mismanaging good horses like this.
All right, let's move on to a race you alluded to before, Andy. Oh, sure, Steve.
I do not think Run Happy wins the race. Don't misunderstand that.
No, I
but
understand.
I do think and I do think he makes it a little more intriguing for Dortmund to exert himself. And then I'm looking to Gun Runner be able to fire the best race of his life and give him a battle. I'm going to use them both. I'm not going to just single on Gun Runner.
Well, I think 5 of them are going to have to fall down for Gun Runner to win, but just my opinion.
That's what makes horse races, folks. Let's talk about that Juvenile Filly Turf, Andy, that you referred to before. I'm going to make you go first on this one. Did you? It sounds like you were having a little trouble with it, but did you come up with an official selection?
None that I want to proclaim publicly. I was going to go with La Coronelle just because I thought she run a good race at Keeneland, but post 14 is just too much of a disadvantage in an evenly matched race like this, and the Europeans probably have the edge here, but it's kind of hard to separate them. I could easily go 6 deep in here and could easily still miss it. So that's why I'm counting on Steve to give me the cold winner here for pick 4 purposes.
I love it, Steve. Well, you're up to the challenge.
I nothing cold in here, but at the same time, I do like 3 horses that you can narrow down somewhat in your pick 3, pick 4s. I like New Money Honey's chances to run a big race, but Chad Brown has been so tremendous all season with turf horses everywhere. And this horse is trained perfectly for this spot as well and comes off with a graded stakes win. and I like the second place that that horse ran to La Coronel in a debut. And then I also think the two Adrian Bryan horses, Hydrangea and I'm looking to the other one, Roly Poly, despite her 13 post, are horses that I think should be used in that play that you're going to use the previous races leading into pick 3 or pick 4.
Just just one note about new money, honey, and about this day of race, this weekend of racing at Santa Anita. This turf course is about as fast as any turf course you'll ever see, and I think that you really have to look at horses in these turf races to see if they have, might have a fondness for a hard course, or if they don't, or if they've done their best running on good or yielding courses to be a little skeptical, and so I'm going to use new money, honey. But the fact that she scored her one win on a yielding course is kind of a negative for me.
Well, I think you're being too fine line there personally. If you look at the field, the vast majority of horses have run on courses that were not like Santa Anita's firm, fast course. But one other thing about the Santa Anita course that's a little weird is that in spite of the fact that it's been so glib, it has actually played stronger to closers.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. No.
And that's kind of interesting, I think. Yeah. And I'm just looking for what I think are the horses that are fit, ready, and are in good hands. Whereas we don't have any furniture makers here in Chad Brown, to get the job done with a really good effort. Okay. Use those three, Andy.
A purely sporting perspective, the Distaff, the 9th race on Friday, is the race of the meet as far as I'm concerned. What a showdown this appears to be between a terrific group, highlighted, of course, by Songbird, the 3-year-old, taking on Stellar Wind and Beholder. For our pick 4 purposes, Steve, do you see using all 3 of them, or are you going to try to lean one way or another, or get really clever and go outside the box for the Distaff?
Well, the truth is that I respect Andy Beyer's speed figures to such a degree that I take a lower view of Songbird's, the undefeated 3-year-old fillies' chances to win this race than I do either of the older fillies that have been battling against each other, Stellar Wind and Beholder. And in truth, I slightly prefer Beholder, even though Stellar Wind has beaten her twice. It's just that there's a certain feeling that I have about Beholder's overall talent, and this is her swan song, no doubt, that I think she is going to be ready to run the best race she's run all year. And I think she's going to need it. And I do think that Stellar Wind is going to be a formidable opponent, but I think they're both going to beat Songbird, personally.
Andy, how about you? Are Songbird's figures being lower a reason to maybe be against her, or is this a situation where
she will not, the number 1 will not darken any of my tickets. I won't even have I won't even have her third in a trifecta. Obviously Songbird has had a commendable season. I mean you can't do better than 11 for 11. But all of the hype, this is one of the greats. I mean she's a racing immortal already. Come on! I mean she's running against 3-year-old, an average 3-year-old crop. She hasn't tested older horses, hasn't tested males. She's never run a fast final time ever. And when people were when she won the Alabama, and people are saying, 7 lengths. I mean, what a great filly. A week later, after she ran a mile and a quarter in 2:03. Arrogate came back on a similar track and won the Travers in 1:59 and change, like close to a 20-length difference. That's great. Songbird isn't great, or at least she hasn't proved it yet. And I'm eager to see whether the betting public is going to believe all the hype and be dumb enough to make this horse the favorite against competition like Beholder and Stellar Wind. Have I expressed my opinion clearly enough on this subject?
I love it. Now, when it comes to the top of the
team, we both share the same view about Songbird. Andy being more dramatic in his approach to it. But I agree. I think Beholder and Stellar Wind are better than she is, at least as I see the race, and are going to battle it out. There may be a horse that can sneak in, and break them up in the exacta. That would be a surprise. I was a little disappointed that Curalina went in this race and not in the other race that she could have been entered in, the filly and mare sprint. But, who knows? We'll see. I do think that the race is between Stellar Wind and Beholder, and I slightly favor Beholder.
Andy, do you see yourself using Stellar Wind and Beholder equally? Or do you have?
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, if a gun were put to my head, I pick Stellar Wind because I think there's a lot of speed in this race, and her 2 times against Beholder, she's been kind of forced to press the issue. And not let Beholder get away from her. I mean, I think she can sit back a little in this race, but it's a fine point. I'll use the 2 of them, and in my trifecta, I'll throw in Forever Unbridled in the 3rd slot as Songbird is struggling to get into the wire.
Pete, if I didn't know better, I would think Andy was taking his opinions from mine expressed on the DRF Players podcast. But
Mike Hogan, a big anti-Songbird, me, big Songbird fan, but again, like we said before, that's what makes the game interesting. Mike, are there any questions, Mike, about Friday before we move on to Saturday's races?
No questions. I think we should move on. There's a lot to cover on Saturday. We've got 9 more stakes races and a little less than 40 minutes to do it. So let's jump there.
I think we're in good shape as long as we keep moving along at this type of a clip. Let's start off with the Juvenile Fillies, which goes as the 4th race, a mile and a 16th, obviously for 2-year-olds. Andy, we'll keep it with you for your thoughts on this race.
Okay, Jameson and Ginger, everybody can see, got a giant figure last time. And, I know a lot of people look at this horse's record and say, there's something kind of freaky about this. I mean, the figure is absolutely legitimate. Now, she did it in the slop. Maybe it was a once-in-a-lifetime fluky performance, but she genuinely ran a figure of 103. The day was straightforward. She was 15 lengths ahead, of a horse who came back and who confirmed that her number with the edge and the figures that she's got. I have to go with her. My other opinion in this race is a negative one. I want no part of American Gal, the undefeated Baffert filly. It looks to me as if that this horse's training was disrupted, and they're kind of forcing the issue to get her into this mile and a 16th race. But I want no part of her.
All right, Steve, how do you see this one?
Well, Jameson and Ginger has a nice figure earned in the slop, as Andy pointed out, and I am going to bet against the fact that she'll reproduce anything of the kind. I do think if she got a sloppy track, we might see it. But I do think that has a lot to do with what she did. At the same time, she stretched out in that race, and even though it was a one-turn mile at Belmont Park, she has the potential to really appreciate at a distance. So I wouldn't put it past her to run a respectable race, and I'll be surprised if she wins. I certainly don't believe she's going to run anything close to 103. In fact, that makes the race, if you look at the race that way, pretty evenly relative to Beyer speed figures. In the high 70s, low 80s are the majority of the horses in the field. And the one horse that caught my eye, even though this horse didn't do it in a route race, and it was certainly, you know, nothing that you could say is going to guarantee a terrific performance, was Union Strike, and I'll explain why. This horse, you know, lost the whip in the stretch in that race and still won convincingly, galloped out really well, and in the workout since, all the workouts make a lot of sense after a layoff in early September. I think the horse is bred to handle the distance pretty decently, and I like Craig Delassie as a trainer, and he took over from Ruiz Shelby, and I think that's got to be a plus, especially given the workout line. I have no strong opinion in the race. I don't think I'm going to invest a whole lot of money in this race or in any combination of races that rely on this race. But if Union Strike goes to post at 6-1 or so, as our morning line indicates, she'll get a little bit of my money.
I don't like dysfunctional managements of horses. You know, the owner had his daughter, who's in his mid-20s,
right,
training his horses, and then fired her, and leading up to the Breeders' Cup, and hired Craig Delassie, who has not won a graded stakes race since 2012. I don't know. It just doesn't sound like a Breeders' Cup winning scenario to me.
I like how we're zeroing in on these soap opera type scenarios.
We have a question from the audience about Frank Palacios wants to know what you guys think about With Honors. From my standpoint, I see her as a possible pace setter who seemingly took well to dirt last out. What do you guys think of her?
She's
one of the
okay.
horses in the race.
Yeah, if you leave out Jameson and Ginger, which I is certainly a reasonable position, but if you take her out, nobody's run a figure that you would think would be worthy of the Juvenile Fillies. So this is a wide open race if the Fig doesn't repeat that.
I should also just comment about Union Strike one more level. I love the fact that he fired his daughter and brought in Craig Delassie. And I also see that reflected in the workout pattern that is very promising. So I'm expecting the horse to run a reasonably good race. And as Andy said, as everybody can see, this is almost a dartboard race where you can take a pick and hope for the best.
All right, let's move on to the
let's move
fifth
this
race.
along to the filly and mare. Yeah, Steve, we'll keep it with you. What do you think here?
And which race are we talking about now?
Steve, are you there?
Filly and mare
I'm
turf.
sorry, we're talking about the filly and mare turf.
Okay. Obvious favorite, although not a heavy favorite, is Lady Eli, who after all did win a Breeders' Cup race last year. And certainly came back to form after a layoff and showed her guts in winning the last race, the Flower Bowl. But there are several horses in here that I think you could go along with. And some of the ones that are coming from Europe are certainly involved. And I haven't finalized my thinking in this race, to be perfectly honest. But anytime Aidan O'Brien has a horse who's a turf horse who's coming in from Europe, who's running in one of our Breeders' Cup turf races, you have to take a close look. And even though Lady Eli is, a legitimate kind of horse to keep an eye out for and possibly be the one to beat, the other Chad Brown in the race, C. Calisi, also fits the race very well. I see this race as being fairly wide open also, and will require further thinking and maybe even an examination of the running styles more closely. But that's as close as I can get to making a selection at this point, and I wish you all luck.
Andy, do you have this one narrowed down any more than Steve does?
Well, the horses he mentioned, I think, are the three correct ones. Lady Eli, looked like one of the all-time greats in the making, as a 2-year-old and early in her 3-year-old season, and until she got, had all her health problems. I'm not sure if her recent form, let's say if we didn't have such respect for the old lady Eli, if you would say if this horse deserves to be the clear favorite in here. I mean, her races have been good, but not off the charts. And I think C. Khaleesi ran at least as well as her stablemate did in that Flower Bowl handicap. I mean, the pace in that race was so slow. She was very much compromised. Still got beat only a couple lengths. I mean, C. Khaleesi is a very good horse. And then, as Steve said, I mean, Seventh Heaven, not just because it's Aidan O'Brien, this horse beat Found, who came out of, out of that defeat to win the Arc. So, I mean, this is, clearly a high-class challenger. I think those three are the ones.
All right, some good ideas for the filly and mare turf. Next, we move on to a pretty interesting rendition of the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Andy, who are you going with in here?
I actually dislike all of them. I could make a negative speech about almost every horse in this field. I'll just make one about masochistic. My friend Andy Serling likes to use the phrase when he's deriding a favorite, this horse is all dressed up, meaning he or she has good-looking lines, but when you look closely, the horse had favorable circumstances and good trips. Masochistic is 2-1 in here after being the lone speed in a field of 3 and wiring the field, after winning an allowance race in her only other start of 2016. The figures are good, yes. 2-1, no way for me. I wish I had a good idea as an alternative. I don't. I have no opinion. I'll defer to Steve here. Just don't take masochistic, Steve.
I wasn't planning to, Andy. So that's. But at the same time, there are some pretty good sprinters in this field, and the horse that wins is going to have to work pretty hard to get the victory. AP Indian has done that in a couple of instances. He won his last by a nose. He won 4 back by a head. He's won all 5 this year. He's a game, gritty horse who runs respectable Beyer speed figures and tends to run near enough to the pace that he can usually challenge. The Baffert horses, Lord Nelson and Dre Fong, also have good records. They've been doing nothing but winning in their last several starts. They're okay. And masochistic is sort of like that too. He's got recent victories and decent Beyer figs, and when he won his last, he certainly did have every advantage to get that done. This is a very difficult race to have a solid opinion in. And anyone who fools himself into thinking that just because they cashed a bet last time out with this horse or with that horse, or they saw this or saw that they've got this race locked up. They don't. Nobody does. And it'll be one of the more competitive races on the card. So if you're going to be playing multi-view race sequences, you're going to have to go deeper than you want to go. And that's the kind of situation that in a 13-race Breeders' Cup spread over 2 days, you don't have to do. You don't have to get locked into wagers that are going to tie up your money just because they're there. There are so many opportunities to pick horses that you like at decent prices that when you see a race like this, you nod your head, you applaud, and when the winner comes home, if you happen to have a small ticket on it, congratulate yourself and move on. I don't want to bet my life on this race. I don't want to bet serious money on this race, but I know I'll enjoy it.
Sounds like action, bet, and or pass there. The 7th race looks like another one where spreading might be the way to go. Talking about the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. This is a race in the past where the local contingent, horses with experience down the hill, have seemed to have an advantage, but we have a deep and interesting contingent of foreign runners in this Breeders' Cup Sprint as well, which is logical given the unusual configuration, sometimes referred to as a European-style turf course. Steve, what are you going to do multi-race-wise when it comes to the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint?
Well, I have a horse that I like in this race at a big price. And so I'm certainly going to use some win and place money on this horse, and I'm going to use him in some kind of combination plays with a few of the others in a race that also has several other contenders. And I'm not going to delude myself into thinking I've got a lock. But Green Mask is a horse that I kind of like for a lot of little reasons. First of all, the horse seems to have had a very nice campaign. He's had
Steve, we got to interrupt you. He's an also eligible.
Yeah, he'll need 2 scratches to get in, but I guess it's possible.
I understand that, and I was going to say that as my next comment. The only problem here is that he might not get into the race. And, you know, I'm hoping he does, and if he does, he's going to get my money. On the other hand, as far as the rest of the field is concerned, there are too many horses in here, just like the previous sprint, that you can get really crazy about. And, you know, like I said earlier, and I don't mean to be hedging, I just don't think it's wise to be throwing money at races where the competition is too widely spread out. So please, 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 let this horse get in the race so I can make some money.
Andy, how about you? Is this a race you see yourself getting involved in, or are there too many difficult questions there?
This race is inscrutable. I make this one observation. The horses who run in turf sprints in the U.S. Are generally, I mean, they're specialists, but they're just generally not of the quality of horses who run in the big, 1 mile stakes. I mean, like, horses like Pure Sensation, yeah, they're good doing what they do, but when you look at the class lines of horses like Obviously and A Lot and Ohm, they've just been running, against a whole different grade of horses. Now, they're all trying to turn back. I looked hard at all of them. Unfortunately, Obviously, early in his career, did try the downhill course 3 times and did okay, but really didn't distinguish himself on it. I'm taking a guess on number 9, A Lot, who won a 7-furlong stake, but has been knocking heads against horses like Tourist in his last. And running well. I mean, he might be termed the class of the field.
All right, some good ideas there.
Well, I don't think we brought the public closer to a winner in that race.
No.
Can't do it everyone, right? I mean, some races are. Some races you get a hot dog and you enjoy the sport. Some races you reach into your pocket. It's only fair.
Another thought. If Green Mask does not get into the race, I want to see the race he does get into.
Okay.
I like it. Well, that's what the Daily Racing Form Stable Mail is for. You can go ahead and put Green Mask in there and see if he's cross-entered somewhere, or keep an eye for the next time he shows up. He's definitely a tough competitor and a cool horse, and I'll be interested to see where he turns up as well. Race 8 is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. It's a Grade 1. Andy, where are you going here?
Well, I will first make this statement. There is no doubt whatsoever which of the horses in the Juvenile has run the best single race to date, and that was Syndergaard in his loss in the Champagne Stakes. I mean, he was in a gigantic 44 and change speed duel. The Chad Brown closer, Practical Joke, came at him. I mean, he battled back to the wire. It was a terrific effort. I mean, in a different situation, you could say, you know, you love this horse, but you know, he's now going around 2 turns. There's plenty of speed in this race. I don't know. I can't narrow this down. I wound up taking Not This Time first and Syndergaard second. You know, I think this is quite a competitive field. My throwout in this race is Gormley, the top figure, coming off a real soft trip last time. But, you know, I could see Not This Time, Syndergaard, Klimt, you know, they're a classic Empire. It's a competitive race.
So I'm going to interrupt real quick. There's a question from David Valento, which I think applies to all the races, at least on dirt, but it's a good time to ask it, I think, in the juvenile, where a lot of these horses are going to be stretching out 2 turns for the first time. Dave wants to know if either of you feel that the track will be uncharacteristically fast and perhaps favoring front runners on Friday and Saturday. Is that how you're approaching it, or are you taking a wait-and-see approach and see how it plays out over the first few races?
You know,
Personally, go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
I don't think the track is going to be biased in any specific way. I think they're going to groom it and pack it down, and it will be relatively fast, and so will the turf course. But I don't think that's going to affect the way that I play the race or races.
I mean, Santa Anita, this has not been one of those insane, souped-up Santa Anita tracks that we know from the past. So I would, you know, at this stage, I would just say we got to look for the best horse.
Steve, what are your thoughts on the juvenile generally?
Well, when Syndergaard ran his race and all of the characteristics that Andy cited, I wrote about in my column in Gaming Today and was very impressed. And I do think that he's obviously a classy horse who has a good chance to win this race. I think you know, it's not going to be easy though, and you're going to not. I don't think you're going to get anywhere near 6-1 that he's listed in the morning line. I think you're more looking at 7-2 perhaps, and I think he might even be co-favored in the race. At the same time, I do share Andy's sort of dismissal of Gormley. Horses at this age and at this state of their careers can improve suddenly, and they can show more than they necessarily seem to indicate in their first couple of starts. So I don't eliminate horses who have won both their races or have run around 2 turns over this track. Nevertheless, I don't see him as having any edge. I feel the same way about Bob Baffert's 2-year-old Klimt, who didn't run his best race in the last outing when he was beaten by Gormley, but I think he's going to have to do better to beat Syndergaard and a couple of others. A horse who attracts my interest a little bit, in addition to Syndergaard, is the 5-horse Classic Empire. Now, he's listed at 4-1, and I think that he's liable to stay around there or maybe even drift up a touch if Syndergaard gets bet down, as I think he might. This horse won a 2-turn race. He had trouble and had to get out of the hopeful stakes when he was an 8-5 favorite. He won his prior 2 races, and he came back from that injury, apparently, and ran a terrific race to win the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland. He's trained well. He's in a good barn, and I think that he's going to be a real factor in this event. So Syndergaard and Classic Empire are my 2 horses in that race, and there are plenty of others.
All right, and then there were 4. We'll go over the late pick 4 in our remaining time here today. We got about 15 minutes to do it. Mike, any more questions before I ask Steve about the Breeders' Cup Turf?
Well, we just had a question about whether or not This Time might go off as the favorite. I'll just say there's probably 3 or 4 that might very possibly go off as the post time favorite, I should say, in the juvenile. Steve and Andy, would you agree?
Yeah, I don't see Not This Time being the favorite. They'll go for one of the California horses.
I already expressed my opinion about the odds board there, and I'll stick with that. I think Syndergaard's going to get bet down more, and I do think the board is going to reflect quite a few horses in median prices, and they won't be a heavy favorite in the race.
So we got the big news yesterday that Found is going to swerve her rumored appearance in the Classic for the seemingly more sensible spot of the Breeders' Cup Turf. Steve, is she the horse to beat in here, or did you go in a different direction?
Well, I think both Flintshire and Found look very similar to me in terms of their overall talent, what they showed in Europe, and what they have done when they were here in America. We had Found win a Breeders' Cup last year, and we've seen Flintshire run very strongly in her races, in his races here. This is a pretty good field. It's not the best Breeders' Cup Turf I've ever seen, but those are two top horses, and they'll take some beating. And I'm not sure which way I'm going to go yet. It might depend on how much, what their odds are. But I think it will be between those two when it comes right down to it. Hello.
I have questions about all the contenders. I mean, Flintshire has been just a tremendous competitor, running some of the biggest turf figures we've made. His last race was a disappointment. I'm not sure if he's tailing off. I think you can probably excuse it because of the yielding course. He's never done well on the soft going, but that race gives me a little pause. Found, I really have some doubts about just the fact that here, like, won the Arc on October 2nd. Came back 2 weeks later, for for another big race at Royal Ascot, and now is wheeling back, 3 weeks later for the Breeders' Cup. I think that I always like the fact that the Coolmore people are always willing to take a shot, and be aggressive with their horses. But in this case, though, it's kind of a free roll. This is almost certainly the last race of her career. So they were talking about trying her on the dirt. It's sort of a it's sort of a free gamble. If she loses, it's not going to hurt her stud reputation or anything like that. So, but I'm not sure this is the best way to prepare for the Breeders' Cup turf. I mean, Highland Reel, who ran second to Found in the Arc, and now has had the 5 weeks off, is very formidable in here, and you've got to consider him as one of the top three contenders. Those are the three, I guess.
All right, let's move on to the Filly and Mare Sprint. We got 3 races left to talk about. 12 minutes left here. You got something else on the turf, Steve?
Yes, I do think when I went over my pair of contenders, I underrated in my review Highland Reel's potential. I like the spacing of his races better than the races that Andy went over, and I think he's almost as good as those two at their best, and so he's definitely in the race. Next case.
Critically, he's shown to like North American racing too, with the big run at Arlington last year. Let's move on to the sprint, though. We got 3 races left and just about 10 or 11 minutes to do them. Andy, is this a race you're excited about betting?
I'm going to bet it. I'm not that excited, but the major fact about this race is there is not much speed in the field, which is unusual for $1 million sprint. And after looking closely to see who the speed is, I'm going to play an exacta of Paula's Silver Lining and Karina Mia.
I like
I'm struggling.
1-2 around the track.
Steve, how do you see this one?
Well, truth is that I'm struggling to find the page in my advanced edition, and I knew this was going to be a problem when we first started, and I mentioned it. So if I have another 20 seconds...
I'll ask Andy a little more. I was going to let Andy get away with the quick opinion on this one. But for you, Andy, it really just comes down to the pace scenario here?
Yeah, I mean, you know, all these horses like run in the mid to upper 90s on figures, but I mean, it really is rather remarkable that you know, there are no front-running burners, and you know, the two that I mentioned, you know, were you know, both you know, showed you know, were vying for the lead in the Ballerina at Saratoga. It was a contentious race. I mean, they're not going to have that. You know, the race kind of fell apart late, but it's going to be a different scenario this time.
Andy, I'm looking at the Moss pace figures, and based on the Moss pace figures, I wonder if a horse like Glory Zapper could even be a little bit faster earlier, and certainly
here's
the local.
The pace figures are a little deceptive on the Ballerina because, yes, they went a slow quarter, but then, you know, everybody in the field hit the jets, you know, and they went a 22 and 1 second quarter, and the field the race kind of fell apart after that. So I think watching the race, I felt that the you know, I refer to the Moss pace figures all the time, but I felt that they were a little just the way that race was run, they were a little deceptive there.
Sometimes efficiency and the way that the numbers get run can affect pace as well as it can final time, and perhaps the Ballerina is an example of that. Steve, did you find your thoughts on the filly and mare sprint?
Yes. Have You Gone Away is my first choice in this race, narrowly over Finest City. And I like them both for different reasons. First, Have You Gone Your Way has good form and terrific workouts, you know, since late August. And I think she's had a work since the October 13th work that's listed in the advanced edition. And I also like the way Velasquez handled her. Yes, Sandy? You were going to say something, Andy?
Yep, nope. No, we probably should move on to the 11th. We're running out of time here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Not a bad idea. We have Tepin defending her title, Steve, in the Breeders' Cup Mile, but she's facing a couple of serious challengers from overseas, as well as a fairly deep local contingent. Do you think Tepin is going to continue her storybook career here, or do you think this is a case where maybe we can make some money taking one of the less fancied runners?
Well, I think Tepin, you know, I would have liked to have seen Tepin stretch out in this on this day, even though she fits the mile just perfectly. I thought the prep race she ran, in which she only ran second, she galloped out real well, and I thought it was going to be a circumstance where they would stretch her out and run her in the longer turf race. But so be it. I think she's obviously a contender and probably will be the favorite. But there are too many horses in this race, I think, that have the potential to upset. And I'm not prepared to, you know, say, yes, she's the horse definitely that I want to single on. No, I think there are several horses, and if you give Andy a chance to share some thoughts first, I'll come back with a couple.
Sounds good.
I have an opinion. In fact, I think this is my best bet of the Breeders' Cup, and it's not Tepin. I think she has a look of a filly who may be a little bit on the downgrade. I mean, that last race, yeah, Fornatale ran away with it on the front end. It wasn't that great. Her race at Woodbine, where she gets a trouble, you can see that trouble call, hit gate, stumbled. That had nothing. That was bogus. I mean, she had a perfect trip, and and won by a half a length over a bad field. I think her glory days may be past. Ironic is going to win this race. I mean, this is a horse who has a tremendous stretch kick, and in all three of his 2016 races, he's been in ridiculous slow-paced situations that he's had to overcome. His last start, he ran a final quarter in 23 flat, and just got beat. But in this race, with Photo Call and a Midnight Storm, and other speeds. He's going to get a pace in front of him. I mean, I mean, this is a really outstanding horse. I think he's going to win here.
Bold pick and a very sensible pick. Steve, what about you in the mile?
I like Veronicus as a contender in the field, and at the price, you got to use him if you're making multi-race bets. There's no question about it. And I like Andy's thinking on the race as well. That that last race is even better than it looks given the pace scenario. And when it comes right down to it, I think he'll certainly be tougher to handle this time than Miss Temple City found him to be last time out when she won that race. But I also think the horse that was third in that race, Tourist, is going to play a role in here, although he doesn't have the win profile that I like to see. This could be a very good race to do, a trifecta, superfecta type layout, using Ironicus in the first and second positions with several other horses in the field, and downplaying, as we both seem to suggest, Tepin's role in that regard. I think it wouldn't hurt to use Tepin in some minor capacity in any of those layouts, but truthfully, I like Ironicus also as being a horse to key on, but I also see other horses in the field, and I'm going to, I think, have an exciting time playing this race. I think a lot of people will, and I hope to have more finalized thoughts available in that seminar I talked about on Friday evening.
All right, the last race we're going to talk about is the last race of the Breeders' Cup meeting. It's the Breeders' Cup Classic, being billed as a showdown between the 3-year-old Arrogate and his massive 122 Beyer speed figure at Saratoga, and California Chrome, who's put together an extremely memorable season, not having put a foot wrong the whole year. Steve, do you see this as a match race between those two, and do you have preference for one or the other if you do?
I think Arrogate is going to win the race. I'm not 100% confident about that, but I love the race that he ran in the Travers after nice preparation in the allowance company races that he ran, and I love the preparation that Bob Baffert has given him. He's had his eye on this race ever since he put him in the saddle in the Travers, and I think that he understands this race better than probably most trainers in the world, having American Pharaoh to his credit, among other horses that he's trained here. And while California Chrome is a very good horse, and he certainly has, established career records for earnings and done other things that will make him a Hall of Famer, I nevertheless think that he's ripe for the taking here if Arrogate does what I think he can do, and that's go to the front, set a good pace, and say, come and get me. I think he's going to be hard to come and get.
Andy, are you in agreement with Steve, or do you see
well, I'm going to, as a fan, let me see, I'm going to root for Arrogate. I want to see this horse run another great race. I mean, I respect California Chrome, but he's a good horse. But his speed, he's never run a stratospheric speed figure. He's basically spent his life beating opportunity a lot of times. He hasn't run a race that would ever bring me out of my chair and say this is great. When Arrogate won the Travers by 12 or 13, I think anybody who watched that race said, this is an unbelievable performance, and so look, this is a whole different game. He's running against older horses. He's going to have speed pressure. He's going up against such a seasoned rival as California Chrome. But I just want to see him do it and be great doing it. So I hate to sound like a fan, but I'm going to be one in the Classic.
All right, we got just 90 seconds or so left. Mike, do we have time for a speed round question?
Well, I've got a question. You've got you mentioned Arrogate's huge Beyer speed figure that he earned in the Travers. We haven't even mentioned the one that Frost had got in the Met Mile, Andy. You've got two epic and historic speed figures coming together in the same race.
Right. I mean, the Met Mile and the number was an absolutely legitimate figure. You don't win races like that by 14 without running fast, but that was his day. You know, it was a one-turn mile at Belmont. He was, you know, he had the day of his life. He's not a, you know, a mile and a quarter, I don't think is his game. You know, he can, you know, they can hang the, he could hang the photograph of the Met Mile finish on his the wall of his stall and admire it for the rest of his life. But that was a one, I think probably a one-time shot for Prost.
All right, folks, we are out of time. I want to thank Andy Beyer. I want to thank Steve Davidowitz. Agree or disagree, always just so great for me personally, so enjoyable to get to spend time with two of my handicapping heroes. I want to thank Mike Hogan, as always, does such a great job putting together and producing these webinars. And I very much want to thank all of you for tuning in. If you joined us partway through the show, it will be archived. You can go to drf.com/YouTube to do just that. Hoping everybody has a great experience, as much fun as we are this week on drf.com, going over these races and betting these races. Thanks also to our sponsor, Keeneland Select. You've been watching a handicapping session presented by Daily Racing Form and produced by drf.com.